Q and Review, celebrating 40 years of audio production, welcomes you to this week's edition of the Glasgow Times Sports Podcast, recorded from our studio in the Bishopbriggs Media Centre and by our volunteers working from home. Keep up to date with Q and Review news via our Facebook, Twitter or Instagram at Q and Review, that's @CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch with us directly by emailing information@qandreview.com, that's INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. Please like and share our podcast and give us constructive feedback.
Evening Times Sport, May 23. Jose Cifuentes' salary. Report by Ewan Payton. Jose Cifuentes is closing in on his move to Rangers. The Ecuador midfielder has been an established transfer target for Michael Beale and the Ibrox club for some while, as the Rangers boss aims to carry out a major rebuild of his first team squad this summer. The 24-year-old Cifuentes is expected to be one of the first, if not the first, signings to kick that process off. The LA Football Club's star's contract is up in December, but the MLS side wants to sell him sooner rather than later so that they don't lose him for nothing. Reports state that Cifuentes' personal terms have all but been agreed with Rangers, as they have pipped to lose to land the player. His agent Stefan Jarin has been in Glasgow recently to seal the deal, with Rangers already providing him with a tour of Ibrox and their training centre. And it would be fair to say, as they remain in advanced talks, that Rangers are well aware of the kind of money that will be needed to bring Cifuentes to the Premiership. In the MLS, they have rules in place that reveal each player's salary package, so this means that clubs around the world can see exactly what any prospective targets are earning. Cifuentes is not one of the higher earners in America, but he's still on a decent wage. The midfielder rakes in around $500,000 a year currently, which works out at just under £8,000 per week. How much more than that Rangers will need to pay to entice Cifuentes to Glasgow remains to be seen. But it's fair to say the Ecuadorian's tidy sum is nothing compared to that earned by Ryan Gauld or ex-Celtic striker Georgios Giacomakis. The Scot takes more than £2 million through his deal at Vancouver Whitecaps, and the Greek striker earns a guaranteed £1.4 million at his new club. Lewis Morgan at New York Red Bulls is on £1 million. Report by Ewan Payton. Evening Times Sport, May 23. Rangers confirm Morelos and Kent exits. Report by Ewan Payton. Rangers have confirmed their retained list for 2023. Alfredo Morelos and Ryan Kent are the headline names who will leave Ibrox this summer. It has been expected for some time that both players would depart Ibrox at the end of their contracts, and it has now been confirmed in a statement by the club. They will be joined by several other major first-team players, such as Alan McGregor, who appears to be retiring, Scott Arfield and Philip Helander. Stephen Davis, who has been out of action since December last year through injury, remains in talks over his future. A club statement reads, "Each of the departing players has given the club excellent service and will move on to the next stage in their careers with the warmest wishes and thanks of everyone at Ibrox and the Rangers Training Centre. Tributes to the departing players will be paid at tomorrow's match with Hearts. Additional acknowledgements to those leaving will continue on the club's digital platforms in the coming weeks, with Alan McGregor to be further recognised in his testimonial match with Newcastle on July 18. Report by Ewan Payton. Evening Times Sport, May 23. SFA Chief describes plans to introduce new fifth tier. Scottish Football Association Chief Executive Ian Maxwell has described plans to introduce a new fifth tier of the game as a positive way of addressing the decline in standards through youth development. Clubs are set to vote on plans for a new 10-team Conference League next month, which would see up to 4 B teams compete alongside several Lowland and Highland League teams. Second-string teams from Celtic, Rangers and Hearts currently compete in the Lowland League but cannot get promoted, and they would remain in the Conference League under the new plans. However, the proposals have been criticised for effectively relegating 200 clubs further down the pyramid. Maxwell pointed out that Scotland under-17s are currently competing in the European finals, but the under-19s have not qualified for at least a decade, and the country's under-21 team dropped from second to fourth seeds. He said, "How do we address that? Introducing B teams will hopefully do that. We think it will do that when we look at the evidence from other countries. When you look at Croatia, they have had 4 B teams in their domestic structure. I think of the top 10 UEFA nations. 7 of them have got B teams in their domestic structure. We think this is the right thing to try." There has been a lot of feedback from teams lower down the pyramid. They feel they are being relegated. It is obvious that if there is another league implemented in the structure, there is another promotion to get through, so I can take that point on board. I think the fact this is a funded league is a positive, because we have 42 clubs within the SPFL, so this means up to Club 52 can potentially be funded. So that provides a softer landing for clubs on the way down from League 2, and it means there is an earlier opportunity for clubs on their way up the pyramid. From a Scottish FA perspective, we are supportive because we see the benefits in terms of player development and improving that player pathway. Aberdeen have turned down the chance to enter a team, and Rangers manager Michael Beale recently claimed the Lowland League was not a good bridge for his young players, and rules on age and nationality of players in the Conference League plans were too restrictive. Maxwell said, "I was at Ibrox on Sunday and spoke to 1 or 2, and Michael was talking about the older players in his squad. They have a B team squad of 17 to 19-year-olds. He also has some 20 and 21-year-olds whom he is concerned about from a development perspective, and that was more the focus of his comments. It was not necessarily about the Conference League. It was more about the players that are slightly too old for the Conference League and not ready for the first team." On criticism from further down the leagues, Maxwell noted a desire for more movement through Scotland's 10 tiers after recently attending a West of Scotland League meeting. He said, "The reality is, from a Scottish FA perspective, that's not within our gift. Leagues vote for changes within their own structure. It is interesting, because the West of Scotland made the point about the B teams not being promoted or relegated. But the winners of the West of Scotland, Beath Juniors, cannot get promoted because they are not licensed. There are challenges within the Scottish football pyramid that we want to try and address, but they are unfortunately going to take a bit longer. But we think the B teams and the Conference League is the right move at this time." Evening Times Sport, May 23. Rangers are our dream Champions League opponents. Report by Mark Walker. Rangers have already been identified as dream Champions League qualifiers opponents by Sturm Graz manager Christian Ilzer. The Ibrox side will enter the Champions League at the third qualifying round stage next season and will be desperate to wipe out the ignominy of this season's campaign, which saw them pick up the unwanted tag of being the worst ever team in the group stages after 6 defeats out of 6. They already know a number of opponents they could face, which include Austrian runners-up Sturm Graz, as well as old foes Union San-Gilloise, Servette, Dnipro or Panathinaikos. And Storm Graz boss Ilzer, who was previously in charge of Austria Vienna and Wolfsberger in his homeland, has revealed he's desperate to be paired against Michael Beale's men in the draw, which takes place in Switzerland on July 24. He said, "Getting drawn with Glasgow Rangers would be my wish, not because they are weak, but I would really like to sample the atmosphere at Ibrox Park. I'd love to hear the Champions League anthem back at Graz, and it's not impossible for us to make it to the group stages. Last season, we missed out narrowly to Dynamo Kiev, and we want to go further. We look forward to the draw." Sturm Graz did play at Ibrox in Europe before. Dick Advocaat's side swept away the then Austrian champions 5-0 in 2000 in the group stages through goals from Ronald de Boer, Michael Moles, Jörg Alberts, Giovanni van Bronckhorst and Billy Dodds. However, Sturm gained a measure of revenge with a 2-0 win in the return leg with Arthur Newman sent off. Report by Mark Walker. Evening Times Sport, May 24. Albion Ajeti set for Celtic return as injury hits. Report by Mark Walker. Albion Ajeti looks to have blown his chance of a move to Sturm Graz after yet another injury ruled him out for the season, with the Austrian side having less than a week to make their loan permanent. It now looks certain he will return to Celtic for next season. The Swiss international moved on the last day of the summer transfer window, with Sturm Graz securing him on a season-long loan, with an option to buy him on a long-term deal. But he's now back in his Swiss homeland, receiving treatment for a calf injury, and will not play again for the Austrian Bundesliga runners-up this season in their 2 remaining league games. Ajeti cost Celtic £5 million in 2020 from West Ham, but he only managed to score 8 league goals in 2 seasons and had no future under Ange Postecoglou. He still has that 1 year left on his contract when he returns to Scotland. Storm Graz have insisted they have yet to make a final decision on his future. Evening Times Sport, May 24. Celtic's Johnston back in training and in race for Scottish Cup final. Report by David Evan. Alistair Johnston has returned to Celtic training. The fullback was on crutches after picking up an injury against Rangers in the Scottish Cup semi-final. However, he has raced back to fitness and joined his teammates in Celtic training yesterday. Johnston will not play against Hibs tonight, but could make a return in the final league fixture against Aberdeen at the weekend. And it means the defender is back in contention to feature in the Scottish Cup final against Inverness next month, as Celtic aim to complete a domestic treble. On Johnston, manager Ange Postecoglou commented, "He trained yesterday, his first session. He trained fine. He won't play today, but all things being equal, if he gets through the rest of the week's training, he should be available for the weekend's game. We'll just see. Hopefully, we'll get him some game time at the weekend, and then we can assess it from there. He's worked really hard with the cup final in mind to try and get back, and he's got back really well. He's worked hard with the medical team and looked after himself really well. It was good to see him training yesterday, and good to have him part of it, because he's obviously been a big part of the second half of our year." Report by David Irvin. Evening Times Sport, May 24. Vinicius Junior solidarity as Glasgow Football League steps up support. Report by Liam Bryce. A trailblazing Glasgow Football League has once again rallied behind Real Madrid star Vinicius Junior and demanded Spanish football adopts strict liability to tackle its racism problem. The Brazilian winger was subjected to appalling racist abuse during Real's La Liga weekend fixture at Valencia, the latest in a shameful series of incidents he has suffered through this season alone. The 22-year-old is reportedly considering his future in Spain, having been left feeling that authorities have not done enough to clamp down on an issue that continues to shame football. And now he has received firm backing all the way from Scotland in the form of the Scottish Unity Football League, the SUFL, who made international headlines earlier this year with a previous show of support for Vinicius. The SUFL, established in Glasgow 23 years ago to challenge racism and prejudice, have urged the Spanish football bosses to follow UEFA and the English Premier League in introducing its strict liability, a rule that would ensure clubs are held accountable for the behaviour of their fans. The SUFL itself operates a strict zero-tolerance policy on discrimination, with severe bans handed out to any players found guilty of such offences. Abdul Bostani, former league president and currently managing director at SUFL side Afghan United, has called on La Liga and the Spanish Football Association to hold an extraordinary general meeting and bring in tougher measures to protect players. Bostani believes the majority of Spanish citizens will be appalled by the scenes which unfolded at the Mestalla Stadium on Sunday and wants to see action, definitive action, taken to ensure they are never repeated. He said, "The continued abuse of Vinicius Junior must stop. It is totally unacceptable what this young man is having to endure in his place of work. We would urge the Spanish football authorities to call now an extraordinary meeting to seek to adopt UEFA's strict liability code of conduct. Spanish clubs seem to have no objection to sign up to its standards when they play in Europe, so it would seem strange if they opposed it in their own country. The reputational damage to Spanish football and Spain itself is really bad. I have friends in Spain who are disgusted by the consistency of racism towards Vinicius. Regretfully, prejudice exists in many, if not all, parts of the world. Our own Unity League was a reaction to recognising it exists here in Scotland. We believe that the vast majority of the people of Spain are like the Scots, good people who are opposed to racism. It is time the voices of Spain's people are heard above the ignorance of a loud racist mob who do a discredit to their great country and its wonderful citizens. Let's all have our voice heard in calling for justice for Junior. Why not call Spain's adoption of strict liability Vinicius law? As it was once said, for evil to flourish, good men need do nothing. Report by Liam Bryce. Evening Times Sport, May 24. Helander could return to his first club in Sweden. Report by Mark Walker. Philip Helander is in talks to return to Sweden with first club Malmo after he was told he will be released by the Rangers side. The 30-year-old defender has not played for over a year since a match against St Mirren last April after suffering a foot injury, and manager Michael Beale described his injury as a unique situation about bone structure in his foot. It was announced he would be released at the end of the season, and Malmo are desperate to persuade him to come back to his home city and to the club where he started his career. The club's sporting director Daniel Andersson said, "We have had contact with him. Right now he is doing rehab training, and the most important thing is that he gets fit and healthy." Helander made 35 league starts for Rangers after a £3.5 million transfer from Bologna 4 years ago, and netted an Old Firm winner in a 1-0 victory in August 2021. He first signed for Malmo 12 years ago and spent 4 years with them before going to Italy to play for Verona and Bologna. Evening Times Sport, May 24. Matt O'Reilly in Celtic admission. Report by Liam Bryce. Matt O'Reilly knows that Scottish Cup final places are on the line as Celtic prepare to round off their Premiership campaign. Ange Postecoglou's champions have 2 remaining fixtures to deal with before a June 3 date with Inverness Caledonian Thistle at Hampden. The first of those is a trip to face Hibs at Easter Road this evening, a chance for players to show the manager they are ready for the National Stadium after a pair of disappointing results against Rangers and St Mirren. With a concluding league game to follow at home to Aberdeen on Saturday, Postecoglou wants to use these fixtures to fine-tune his squad for a potentially treble-winning occasion, and midfielder O'Reilly expects everyone in the dressing room will be striving to catch his eye. "Yes, definitely," the 22-year-old said of the competition for places. "It has been that way the whole season, to be completely honest. I don't think it's because there's a cup final coming up that people are suddenly changing the way they train and play. It has been pretty consistent throughout the year. We know that whoever does step on the pitch is good enough to do a job for us, and we have enough firepower coming off the bench to improve the level as well. There will definitely be guys feeling they can stake a claim. I think everyone should have that mindset. If they don't, they are probably lacking some sort of competitive edge, and I don't think we have a team like that. Everybody in there wants to play. After clinching the Premiership title at Tynecastle, Postecoglou felt the physical and mental toll of a season spent competing on 4 fronts, including Europe, could be underestimated from the outside. Given there was essentially nothing on the line in their last 2 league outings, it could be said that toll has caught up with Celtic to an extent. But O'Reilly insists they cannot use that as an excuse, regardless of context. He said, "I don't think we're in a place where we are physically struggling, to be honest. Mentally, it's a long season, but we all know we've still got a job to do. There are still a couple of weeks to go in the season, so I don't think we really have any excuses, especially because we are playing for a football club like this, where the demands are so high. We're not thinking too much about how we are league winners right now. Of course we are league winners, but it's not really our focus. We have a couple of games to look forward to and enjoy, but we have to bear in mind we still have a job to do. When you're used to performing at a high level and winning pretty much every game, it's natural when you don't win, there's going to be questions asked. We know how it works, especially here at Celtic, given the club we are. It's not something we are surprised about, and not something we're unprepared for. We're all good." Report by Liam Bryce. Evening Times Sport, May 24. Scotland rugby star thanks ambulance staff who saved brother's life. Report by Craig Williams. Edinburgh rugby and Scotland star Darcy Graham has thanked ambulance staff for saving his brother's life after a horror crash. Graham visited Hoyk Ambulance Station to thank staff Gary Brown and Jenny Braithwaite and present the station with a donation of £500 and a signed match jersey. Aged 17 at the time, his brother Clark Graham was involved in an accident near the village of Ashkirk in the Borders, north of Hoyk, which left him in a coma for 3.5 weeks. Graham, who is now preparing for the Rugby World Cup in France, previously donated £500 to the Hoyk station, donated on behalf of the club's sponsors, Scottish Building Society, after winning the team's Player of the Month last September. He was once again chosen as Edinburgh's April Player of the Month this year and chose the ambulance service as the beneficiary. Graham said, "It means so much to me and my family. Without the Scottish Ambulance Service and what they did that night at Clark's accident, he wouldn't be here. So it's an easy one for us to give back to them, to just kind of say thank you. The quick decisions they made that night thankfully saved Clark's life. It was very emotional meeting the crew. It's kind of hard to put into words what to say to them. It's an easy one for me to pick. It's not just my family they've helped. It's so many other people's families and lives they've saved just doing their job. Day to day is what they are here for, and we kind of take it for granted almost. Having the ambulance service, having the NHS, everything. We are very lucky to have these services just on a phone call." Gary Brown, who has been with the Scottish Ambulance Service for 14 years, said it was fantastic of Darcy to donate. He said, "It was great to meet him and hopefully we can meet Clark soon. The money will be donated to the station, so it will stay in Hoyk." He said the money will directly benefit the patients the ambulance service attends to. Report by Craig Williams. Evening Times Sport, May 24. Scottish football fans set to break attendance record tonight. Report by Aidan Smith. Fans are set to break a Premiership attendance record tonight, achieving the highest crowd figures for a top-flight season in the SPFL's history. An impressive 3,629,874 supporters have already attended matches in this season's 2022-23 Premiership. Only 9,458 fans would need to attend this evening's 6 games to surpass the 3,639,331 who attended games in the division in season 2018-19, the previous high for a top-flight campaign in the SPFL's near 10-year history. The average attendance per round in this season's Premiership currently stands at 100,829. It is more good news for Scottish football after it emerged earlier this year that our game has by far the highest attendance per capita in European football this season. Neil Doncaster, SPFL Chief Executive, said, "It is great to see that our clubs in the Cinch Premiership are on course to set a new SPFL attendance record. It is hugely encouraging to see our crowds continue to go from strength to strength, given the importance of gate money to our game north of the border. Supporters attending our games help create the unique atmosphere that make our matches so compelling, and I hope they're looking forward to the many important games across the division tonight." All matches across the top 6 and bottom 6 kick off at 7:45 p.m. Rangers vs Heart of Midlothian is live on Sky Sports, a big match for Stephen Naismith's side as they sit just 2 points off third in the race for European football. Aberdeen have the chance to secure third spot if they defeat St Mirren at Pittodrie, depending on the scoreline at Ibrox in the televised game. In the bottom 6, 12th place Dundee United host 10th place Kilmarnock, with Jim Goodwin's side having the chance to move ahead of Derek McInnes' side on goal difference with a victory. Ross County, who sit in 11th spot and 2 points above Dundee United, host 9th place St Johnstone and could move out of the relegation playoff spot with a draw or a win. In the other matches, this year's champions Celtic travel to Easter Road to play Hibs, while Motherwell could secure 7th spot if they defeat 8th placed Livingston at the Tony Macaroni Arena. Report by Aidan Smith. Evening Times Sport, May 25. McClymont taking nothing for granted in rich run of golf form. Report by Nick Roger. Lorna McClymont has hit such a rich vein of form over the last year or so, she just about needs a tourniquet to cope with the spurts of success. After a glory-laden 2022 campaign, illuminated by victory in the Irish Women's Open Amateur Championship, the Stirling University student has not let up as the 2023 season rolls on. In recent weeks, the Dumbarton golfer has retained her Irish title while adding the Welsh Open trophy to a jam-packed mantelpiece that must be as big as the Erskine Bridge. McClymont is flying so high, the 22-year-old could probably breeze over to Ladybank for this week's Scottish Women's Amateur Championship on an updraft of her own confidence. In this fickle old game, it's important to savour the triumphs when they come along. You never know what those pesky, meddling golfing gods have in store, after all. "I'd love to keep this up, but this is golf, and it often doesn't work like that," said McClymont, whose purple patch has also included various victories on the R&A's Student Tour Series, as well as a playoff defeat in the Helen Holm Scottish Women's Open. You can't win everything, so I'm just trying to enjoy this run, she says. McClymont, of course, is well aware of the savage morale-sapping dunts that are part of golf's rich tapestry. In last season's Scottish Championship final, the Mulgai member was 4 up with 8 to play against Cameron Nielsen, but lost at the first extra hole. It was a sore one to take, and it can still be hard thinking about it, admitted McClymont, who hails from the same Dumbarton parish as that late great amateur grandee Charlie Green. There were a few tears shed after it, but, in a strange way, the whole experience helped me. It showed me that, in golf, nothing is over until it's over. I'll admit it, when I had a big lead, I was thinking, oh, I've got this. And then I was quickly brought back to reality. They do say, though, that you learn more from your losses than your wins. In many ways, I used that defeat as a springboard. She certainly did. One of her wins on the Arran Day Student Series was aided by a flabbergasting, record-busting 13 under 60 at Montrose last September. And she said, it was one of those weird days. The lowest I'd ever shot before that was a 9 under at Gullen. Over the last few months, I think my mental approach has been the biggest factor. I've been a bit more positive and a bit more patient. I have a much higher acceptance level if things don't go too well. I was always quite hard on myself. I can deal with setbacks much better now. Introduced to golf at the age of 11 or 12, McClymont came on in leaps and bounds, and she reflected, I was perhaps a bit later getting into it than some. I started with a handicap of 36, and in my first season I got that down to around 19. From 19, I got down pretty quickly to 8, so there were some big leaps in a short period of time. I got lots of support from my family. They must have seen something in me. They could tell that I was enjoying it, and they kept me at it without putting too much pressure on. The support I get from Mulgai as well almost leaves me speechless. It's a great club. I just want to see where my golf takes me. The cut and thrust of the professional scene would be the ultimate destination for McClymont once she completes her degree in sports studies. Her good friend, Stirling graduate and Ladies European Tour rookie Louise Duncan, is on a journey that McClymont would like to follow, while the sage counsel of Dean Robertson, who runs such a successful golfing program at Stirling, he'll probably get immortalised in a monument on the Abbey Craig, offers continual expertise and experience. Dean's got a great golfing brain to pick, added McClymont, who can also tap into the vast knowledge of the decorated duo of Katrina Matthew and Catherine Imrie in the Scottish golf setup. I often work and train along with Louise, so it's a great wee circle to be involved in. McClymont has found that the winner's circle is not a bad place to be in either. Report by Nick Roger. Evening Times Sport, May 25. Kyogo and Hatate called up by Japan. Report by Aidan Smith. Kyogo Furuhashi and Ryo Hatate have finally been handed international call-ups for Japan after months of snubs. The Celtic duo were left out of Hajime Moriyasu's squad for the World Cup in Qatar, and they were also snubbed during more recent camps. Kyogo and Hatate will now be involved during a Kirin Cup doubleheader with El Salvador in Tokyo and Peru the opponents in Suta next month. Daizen Maeda, who did make the squad for the World Cup, has also been called up for the matches. Moriyasu has been widely criticised for ignoring Kyogo, who was handed the Scottish Premiership Player of the Season award after netting 25 goals in 34 games. And he's also snubbed Hatate, despite a superb season, as Celtic swept to another title and are one step away from completing a treble. Kyogo's call-up is his first since September last year for pre-World Cup friendlies, and he was devastated to miss the tournament. He has 3 international goals in 16 appearances for his country. Hatate was also in the squad for that game against Ecuador last year, but has only 1 cap. Celtic colleague Tomoki Iwata has 4 caps for his country, but Maeda is a firm fixture in the Japan squad and played and scored at the World Cup, his second for his country, against Croatia at the tournament. Moriyasu did not even visit Scotland on a recent fact-finding mission to Europe, but has praised Kyogo's recent form and said, "I think what Kyogo has done has been wonderful. He has scored a lot of goals this season." Report by Aidan Smith. Evening Times Sport, May 25. Kevin Van Veen makes history. Report by Darren Johnston. Kevin Van Veen became the first post-war player since Mark Viduka in 2000 to score in 10 consecutive Scottish top-flight games after netting in last night's draw against Livingston. The Dutchman also matched the record set by Motherwell hero Hughie Ferguson, who accomplished the same scoring feat 103 years ago. The informed forward pounced after only 3 minutes, lashing home a close-range effort after finding himself in space inside the area, as Motherwell and Livingston fought out a draw. Ahead of Sunday's final game of the season at home to Dundee United, and with 28 goals to his name, he is now only 2 away from becoming the first Motherwell player since Dixie Deans in 1968-69 to reach the 30-goal milestone in a single campaign. Evening Times Sport, May 25. Rangers announce pre-season friendly showdown. Report by Aidan Smith. Rangers have announced a summer friendly against Hamburger SV, and the Ibrox clash will take place on Saturday, July 22, with a 3 p.m. kick-off. The match will celebrate the long-standing relationship and official partnership between both clubs and their supporters, as well as providing a test for Michael Beale's new-look squad ahead of the 23-24 campaign. With natural links through the cities of Hamburg and Glasgow, the relationship dates back to 1970, with the first friendly between the sides played in that year. The weekend of the match will see a range of fan-based activities on and around the match day, as both clubs join to celebrate the friendship and bond between both sets of supporters. Tickets for the friendly are priced at £15 for adults, £10 for concessions, £5 for children, and £1 for junior MyGers members. Meanwhile, Michael Beale welcomed Kieran Dowell to Rangers after watching his side drop 2 points in a 2-2 draw against Hearts at Ibrox. The Light Blues announced before the game that the 25-year-old midfielder would be joining the club from Norwich in the summer. Beale was enthusiastic about Dowell, saying, "I am delighted to get Kieran, and he is a boy I have known for quite a while, as when I was at Liverpool he was at Everton. He played for England under-21 and then got a move to Norwich and played in the Premier League. They have had changes of coaches, so he comes in and knows 3 or 4 of the dressing room. We have missed a lefty since we lost Joe Aribo. He is similar to Tom Lawrence, Scott Arfield, Todd Cantwell, that he can play in midfield or upper line. I think he will kick on here, and someone who will be seen as a good signing over time, and I am looking forward to working with him. Report by Aidan Smith. Evening Times Sport, May 25. St Johnstone to name Stephen McLean as manager. Report by Aidan Smith. St Mirren are set to appoint Stephen McLean as their permanent manager after the interim boss guided the club to safety. McDiarmid Park legend McLean, who won the Scottish Cup back in 2014, was given the nod to take charge after Callum Davidson was dismissed in April. McLean was Davidson's assistant, and since taking over he has lost just once, while winning crucial matches against Dundee United and Kilmarnock. Saints chairman Steve Brown now looks set to appoint McLean on a permanent basis, with the club heading into a summer of uncertainty. Brown is set to step down as chairman come the end of the season, and the club is up for sale. It remains to be seen who, if anyone, will buy the Perth outfit, and if that is the case, Jeff Brown has vowed to step in and return to the position that he held up until 2011. McLean's appointment will provide stability to the football side of proceedings at McDiarmid Park, and the former striker is already planning his recruitment ahead of the summer window. Speaking recently about being named permanent boss, McLean said, "I'm comfortable with anything, to be honest. My mind is still on preparing the team properly and winning games. When the chairman wants to speak to me, we'll speak. I'm enjoying myself, and hopefully the players are enjoying themselves as well. I think you can see that in our performances and results." Report by Aidan Smith. Evening Times Sport, May 26. Gourlay to tread quietly as he seeks to step out of the shadows. Report by Susan Egglestaff. Such has been the strength of men's 1500 metres running in Scotland over recent seasons. Neil Gourlay has been forced into the shadows by the achievements of Josh Kerr and Jake Whiteman, who, between them, have collected Olympic, World, European and Commonwealth Games silverware. The signs, however, are that Gourlay is ready to emerge from the shade. The 28-year-old has, for some time, shown himself to be an impressive middle-distance prospect. British champion in 2019 was a highlight in a spell that has seen him become a Great Britain stalwart and a regular in major championship finals. But Gourlay has already reached a big milestone in 2023, collecting his first major championship medal. A silver in 1500 metres at the European Indoor Championships in March came hot on the heels of setting a British indoor record at the distance, and he admits that while he has long believed he had the ability, making the podium has caused a small but significant shift of mindset over the past 2 months. "I've always had plenty of belief in myself. In the long term, I've always thought I could reach this level," the Glaswegian says. But it's all very well saying something. It means nothing until you go out there and do it. So achieving what I did in the indoors does make a difference. It's validating more than anything else, really. You haven't arrived until you've arrived. So for me, what I did this indoor season is at a different level to what I've done in the past, and to finally get a medal at a major championship was a big step. Gourlay is now ready to transfer that indoor form to the outdoors, having spent much of his pre-season at altitude at his base of choice, Flagstaff in Arizona. He will, today at the LA Grand Prix, make his first competitive appearance of the outdoor season. He will not, however, be racing the 1500 metres, but the 5000 metres, which is, he says, part of the master plan to ensure he is ready to compete with the world's best when he moves back down to his speciality distance. He continues, where the 1500 metres are going now, it's not who's the fastest going into the last lap. It's fast from the very start. So it's about how strong you are and how strong you can remain over 3 rounds at the major championships. So I need to have that endurance to compete over 5K with some of the best guys in the world, because otherwise I don't stand a chance in the 1500 metres. I need to be aerobically strong enough to live with these fast paces. This first race of the season, I'm testing my strength and seeing how far I've come on the endurance side of things. Doing my first 5,000 metres for a long time is daunting, but I'm glad I've had this in the calendar because it's ensured I'm ready. Over the coming weeks and months, it is likely Gourlay will once again dip under the radar. This time it will be by choice. Having made some loud and proud predictions in 2022 that he was going to break the British indoor record, he failed to do so, and he realised that trying to be someone he is not was detrimental to his performance. So this season, he will return to doing what he knows works for him. He says about his prediction, in 2022 I was in really good shape and announced I was going after the British record, and I was probably ready to do it. But I had a really rough day, and there and then I thought, I'm never doing that again. It's good for fans to know what athletes' intentions are, but I felt it wasn't me. I don't like to shout about things before I race. I much rather I let my actions do the talking. So it's been a change of approach this year, and I did decide I was going to stay true to who I am. I don't like being all talk. I much prefer going into things quietly, because by the end of the race, everyone's going to know what you're made of, so you don't need to talk about it beforehand. I respect people who do talk, and I love MMA and all the smack talking, but it's just not me. Following today's outing in LA, Gourlay will head to Europe for the Diamond League circuit before the British Championships in July, which double as the trials for the World Championship team. With the Giffnock North athlete having already run the qualification time for World Championship selection, a top 2 finish in the National Championships will guarantee his place in the GB squad for the event in Budapest, where he will, he hopes, prove that his European indoor medal was merely a springboard for global success. He is well aware, however, there needs to be an improvement on his personal best of 3 minutes 32.93 seconds if he is to threaten the likes of defending world champion Whiteman, as well as Jacob Ingebrigtsen for global silverware. And he says, I've not won a medal at world level yet, so that's the next goal. The way the 1500 metres is being run right now, you have to expect that you're going to have to run a minimum of 3.29 to win a medal at world level, and I'd imagine a minimum of 3.28 to win a world championships. Those are some of the fastest time that anyone has ever run. So I suppose if you think of it like that, it's daunting. But how I was running indoors shows I'm a lot closer than I've ever been. Report by Susan Egglestaff. Evening Times Sport, May 26. Jack Butland Rangers transfer latest. Report by Ewan Payton. Jack Butland has remained coy on his future when asked to address his links with Rangers. The goalkeeper, who is on loan at Manchester United from Crystal Palace, has been heavily touted for a move to Ibrox this summer. Michael Beale is keen to sign the former England number 1 as part of his first team rebuild in the coming months. He has barely featured in the last 3 seasons and is believed to be committed to gaining regular action next term, so a move north of the border appeals. Manchester United are keen to sign Butland for free when his deal at Palace expires this summer, but he would only serve as a backup to David De Gea. Ultimately, it will come down to whether Butland chooses to become a first-choice keeper again, or money to stay in the Premier League. However, he has responded to the links with Rangers. The 30-year-old greeted supporters outside Old Trafford last night as United thumped Chelsea 4-1, and one fan appeared to catch him off guard as he signed autographs and took pictures with the punters. In a video circulated online, a supporter could be heard asking him, "Are you going to Rangers?" Butland responded, "Pardon?" Then when the fan again asks Rangers, he replied, "Maybe." Beale admitted that a deal was not close when directly asked about Butland earlier this week. Butland is yet to make an appearance for United, but could well feature in Sunday's final league game of the season against Fulham, with Champions League qualification already secured. Report by Ewan Payton. Evening Times Sport, May 26. Heriots benefit from buying into Ben Cairns' greater expectations. Report by David Barnes. Former Edinburgh and Scotland centre Ben Cairns has overseen an impressive upturn in fortunes since taking over as head coach at Heriots ahead of the 2023 Super Series sprint. So much so that the Golden Acre outfit now have a chance to pick up their first piece of silverware at this level when they take on Ayrshire Bulls in the competition's playoff final at Millbrae tonight. We're pretty happy with how things have gone over the last few months, but we also recognise that we have not won anything yet, cautioned Cairns, before acknowledging the progress which has been made. We had a tough start to this sprint campaign, being 24-0 down at half-time against Edinburgh A, but we've gone unbeaten essentially since then, so it has got better for sure. I think there has been some really good development of the squad generally. We've used a lot of different players, brought new players in as well, which has been great, and there has consistently been 5 under-20s in our matchday 23 each week, so lots to be positive about. In saying all of that, this time last year, I was coach at Stirling when we got to the final of the sprint, then it fell off a cliff, so I am mindful of that. So we want to go to Millbrae and put our best foot forward, but at the same time, it is about building blocks, and I need the guys to remember that we are going to get better from here and push levels further than where we're at currently. According to Cairns, the key to the improvements his team have made lies in a better understanding and buy-in into what is expected of teams in this tier of the Scottish Rugby Ladder, which was created in 2019 with the aim of providing a rung between the traditional club game and the full-time pro tier consisting of Edinburgh and Glasgow Warriors. He explains, there's definitely been a big shift from an environmental, cultural point of view. When I came in, the teams were really still working with a Tuesday and Thursday night training week. So we've now bolstered that with a Monday session and made sure strength and conditioning is part of our programme rather than on the side. So we've asked the guys to commit a lot more, and to be fair to them, they've all bought into that. I think everyone knew there needed to be a change, and anything we have achieved so far has developed from it being a bit more like a semi-professional environment than it was before. With a salary cap of not much more than £125,000 per annum to cover 29 men squads, nobody is going to get rich playing Super 6, so Cairns and his fellow coaches have to be reasonable about what they demand of players. Cairns says, I actually think these guys have to be more committed than a full-time rugby player, which sounds daft, but they've also got full-time jobs or full-time education, and if they are missing a family event because they are playing rugby on a Friday night, they can't just shrug and say, well, that's how we pay the mortgage. So it's a real challenge for these guys. And as coaches, we can't be set in stone because guys will just walk. We've got to work with each player on a case-by-case basis. And if they've got a good reason not to be available, when we have to accept that and move on. 4 years after its controversial inception, the Super Series remains a divisive topic amongst rugby supporters, with its critics arguing that the existence of this protected league, made up of teams appointed by Murrayfield, sitting just above the traditional club pyramid, has a stifling effect on those left on the outside. It is not his job to wade into that debate, but from a coaching perspective, Cairns can see progress and cause for optimism about the future of Super Series rugby. He says, I think, generally speaking, the big positive of this sprint campaign is how competitive it has been across the board. Apart from the Southern Knights at the bottom of the table, everyone else has been able to beat everyone else, with Boroughmuir Bears beating Ayrshire Bulls demonstrating that. And the inclusion of Edinburgh and Glasgow Warriors backup teams added an extra dimension, which has been really positive. But I also think that there's still a lot of room to grow. There is much more we can do off-field to make it more commercial, to bring more money into it, to make it a bit easier for guys to make the commitment we are looking for in order to drive standards. But as a starting point, and I still think it is at a starting point, I would say it has been pretty positive overall. Report by David Barnes.
From the Glasgow Times, Sunday the 28th of May 2023, from the sports section. Celtic 2, Rangers 0. Instant reaction to the burning issues? Report by James Kearney. Celtic secured the final silverware of the season as a 2-0 triumph over Rangers ensured Fernand Alonso's side retains this Women's Scottish Cup. This was the first time that the women's final had been played at Hampden, and the occasion will live long in the memory for Celtic, who had Natasha Flint and Claire O'Riordan to thank for their second half goals that decided the match. Here are 5 things we learned from an historic day at the National Stadium. Past pain. Both teams come into this match with a point to prove after they each suffered heartbreak on that dramatic final day of the SWPL season a week ago. Celtic were bidding to retain their Scottish Cup crown and avoid a trophyless season, while Rangers were looking to follow up on their Sky Sports Cup success and give departing manager Malky Thompson a fitting send-off. It was a rather cagey beginning at Hampden as both teams shifted the ball around patiently, looking for gaps to expose their opponent's defence. The large pitch at the National Stadium took a little getting used to, too, as did the grass surface, given these teams play most of their football on AstroTurf. It was a pretty slow start, the sort of game that really needed a goal to get things going. In the end, we got two in quick succession that left Celtic in a commanding position, and it proved too great a mountain for Rangers to climb. Both Celtic and Rangers had some demons to exercise from last week's disappointment, and, in the end, it was the former that managed to do just that. Celtic were brave on the ball, playing out from the pack in almost dogmatic fashion, but to their credit, they never looked especially flustered by Rangers' high press. Caitlin Hayes, in particular, was unflappable in the ball, picking out her teammates with apparent ease. Further ahead, Jacinta was causing problems down the right wing, making the most of the space afforded to her and driving with menace towards the Rangers' goal. The attacker was sometimes let down by her decision making in the final third, but there was no question that she looked like her side's most obvious route to goal. Rangers, meanwhile, opted for an aerial bombardment when attacking. Brogan Hay and Emma Watson were finding gaps on either flank and swinging in delivery after delivery, but the Celtic defence were holding firm and repelling them. When the half-time whistle rang out at Hampden, Celtic goalkeeper Pamela Tajanar hadn't had a save to make. Sherman Gaius spurred a glorious opportunity in the brink of the interval, doing well to rob centre-back Hannah Davidson of the ball, but the Celtic wingers dragged her shot agonisingly wide of the post. Jacinta was next to fluff her lines, again dragging her shot wide of the far post after scarping in behind the Rangers' defence. But the attacker would soon make a telling contribution as Celtic opened up a 2-goal lead. Previous meetings between these two sides this term have been settled by Celtic's set-piece prowess, and Fran Alonso's side were looking dangerous from dead ball situations throughout this contest. It is a handy weapon that Celtic have in their attacking arsenal, and they weren't shy about using it. Jacinta fired a warning shot as early as the 8th minute, looping a corner in from the left that rattled the crossbar before going behind. The Australians' next effort came even closer to breaking the deadlock, picking out a teammate at the back post who headed it back across goal, but Flint couldn't make sufficient contact to steer the ball home in a crowded 6-yard box. A succession of corners at the start of the second half, again from Jacinta, asked some awkward questions, but to their credit, Rangers were able to repel the set pieces, which more often than not whipped in towards the back post. When the breakthrough eventually arrived in 64 minutes, it was no surprise that it came from a corner. The delivery from Jacinta wasn't adequately dealt with, and, although Chloe Craig's initial shot was blocked, Flint was at hand to turn the ball in from close range. A few minutes later and it was 2-0. Jacinta's corner picked up O'Riordan at the near post, who looked her header over the despairing reach of Victoria Essen and into the back of the net. This was the first domestic women's match in Scotland with the all-seeing eye of VAR in play, but, for once, the technology was not the star of the show. The problems induced by the introduction of video referees on the men's game are manifold and well documented, but it was used sparingly at Hampden. There were the usual groans and grumbles from the crowd when play would continue for 10 seconds or so after an offside pass, as the linesman waited for the all clear before raising his flag, but, other than that, VAR's interference was minimal, until a huge decision was made with 5 minutes to go. Rangers' Laura Berry nipped in behind the Celtic defence, and kept her composure to coolly slot the ball home, only for the goal to be ruled out by VAR for offside a minute or two later. It wasn't so long ago that the Women's Cup final was being played at the likes of Broadwood, and here we are now at Hampden, a far more fitting venue for the country's top domestic cup competition. Both sides received vociferous backing from the stand with an attendance upwards of 10,446, an increase from last year's final at Tynecastle that had 4,345 watching on, highlights the growth the women's game has experienced in recent years. The final day of the SWPL season drew crowds of over 10,000 and 15,000 to Ibrox and Celtic Park respectively, and, while there is some way to go before we see those sort of figures on a regular basis, they unequivocally point towards an increase in interest in the women's game. The National Stadium is simply purpose-built for occasions such as these, and it was refreshing to see the cup final being given the full treatment. Spectacular fireworks and pyrotechnics exploded into life as the two sets of players marched onto the park, generating a fantastic atmosphere in Mount Florida. Celtic may have gone on to lift the Scottish Cup, but it's hard to escape the feeling that the women's game in general was the big winner. And that report was by James Kearney. From the Glasgow Times, Monday the 29th of May 2023, from the sports section, ex-Rangers ace Josh Windass scores League One playoff final winner, by Ewan Payton, sports writer. Former Rangers star Josh Windass netted the winner as Sheffield Wednesday beat Barnsley in the League One playoff final. The attacker's last gap header secured promotion to the Championship for the Owls in a highly dramatic fashion. Following in the footsteps of playoff winning dad, Dean, the 29-year-old scored with a bullet diving header in added time of extra time as a penalty shootout looked inevitable. More than 40,000 ecstatic Owls celebrate wildly at the death after their team had finally seen off a gutsy Barnsley side who had played with 10 men following Adam Phillips' 49th minute red card. Wembley was again bathed in sunshine as the Owls made the most purposeful start. Barry Bannon saw an early volley deflected wide after the Barnsley defence failed to clear Windass's low cross. From the resulting corner, unmarked defender Dominic Iorfa fired in an effort which Harry Isted palmed away superbly. Barnsley, who had done the double over the Owls in the regular campaign, threatened first when Phillips blazed over after meeting Slobodan Tetic's perfect cushioned header. As the half-hour mark approached, both sides seemed to have settled somewhat amid the white-hot atmosphere, but the Gomouth incident was proving elusive. Another decent Barnsley opportunity then went begging. Luca Connell's corner was only half cleared by Bannon, straight into the path of Nicky Cadden, who again smashed wastefully off the top from 15 yards. Michael Duff's men, who had barely half the amount of supporters inside the stadium compared to Wednesday, ended the first period just about on top. With defences largely on top, both sides needed to step it up in the second period. However, a huge potential turning point came 4 minutes after the restart, when Barnsley midfielder Phillips lunged in on Wednesday striker Lee Gregory, earning himself a straight red card from the referee Tim Robinson. Incredibly, Barnsley were thwarted by the woodwork 5 minutes later, when Liam Kitching diverted Cadden's initial strike onto the crossbar. As the game was now opening up at both ends, Bannon curled an exquisite strike inches past the angle. The Owls had now wrested back the initiative in what was rapidly turning into a thriller, and Windass fizzed a low drive just off target. Iorfa also headed over the top as a breakthrough remained elusive. The 10 men of Barnsley were proving tough to break down, while at the other end they almost struck with 12 minutes left before the game was to head to extra time. Substitute James Norwood charged ominously past Rhys James before crashing in a shot which Cameron Dawson beat away superbly. Both sides went mighty close to an opener in a frenetic first period of extra time. Michael Iwikwe, Michael Smith and Bannon all failed to take opportunities for the Owls, whilst the otherwise impressive Connell incredibly missed an open goal for Barnsley. The drama dissipated in the final 15 minutes until that unforgettable last play of the game when Windass finally broke brave Barnsley's resistance. And that report was by Ewan Payton. From the Glasgow Times, Monday the 29th of May 2023, from the sports section, Kevin Van Veen Rangers transfer backed by ex-Ibrox defender. Report by Ewan Payton. Rangers have been urged to sign Motherwell striker Kevin Van Veen. Former Light Blues defender Craig Moore believed the Dutchman should be signed up by his old club as part of the summer rebuild. Michael Beale is planning a busy summer of transfers as the Englishman aims to reshape his first team squad at Ibrox. Kieran Dowell has already been announced on a 3-year contract from Norwich City. Dujon Sterling is expected to be announced soon, while Jack Butland is another name who has been strongly linked on a free. With Alfredo Morelos and Ryan Kent leaving the club though, it's up front that Beale will need to heavily focus in the coming weeks and months. Antonio Kolak remains the only recognised centre-forward on the books at Rangers, and Moore reckons that Van Veen is an option that would be fairly low risk and cheap for Rangers to explore. Stuart Kettlewell recently claimed that Van Veen would be unattainable for clubs in Scotland, but the Aussie former centre-back reckons he could be available for £750,000. He told Go Radio, Kevin Van Veen to our Rangers, for example. You spend, say, £750,000. A player that knows the league. He's not over the hill, he's 31. He's shown that he does it in this league. Sometimes you spend more on someone that there's a risk factor to it, coming to a new country, being able to settle in. I'm not saying Kevin Van Veen starts for Rangers, but I'm saying that Rangers need 2, 3, 4 strikers. I'm telling you right now, there will be worse options out there. Asked if he could see the move happening, he added, I don't know, this is just me. That kind of goal scoring record. Big, physical. If you're dominating the ball and creating opportunities, he's a goal scorer. And that report was by Ewan Payton. From the Glasgow Times, Monday the 29th of May 2023, from the sports section. Kieran Tierney Arsenal moment convinces fans of transfer exit. Report by Ewan Payton. Kieran Tierney could well have played his last game for Arsenal. The Scottish defender has been heavily linked with a move away from the Emirates this summer after a distinct lack of game time under Mikel Arteta this season. The former Celtic star came on as a substitute in the Gunners' final day 5-0 win over Wolves yesterday. The Scotland international joined his teammates in the traditional lap of honour at the end of the game. But some fans have been left convinced that KT has graced the turf in North London for the last time as an Arsenal player. In a video widely circulated online, the left back appeared to be soaking up the applause from the home supporters. It certainly seemed to be an emotional few moments, as Tierney took in the appreciation from his fans as they chanted, "There's only one Kieran Tierney." Newcastle United, Aston Villa and Manchester City have all been touted for Tierney, who has played second fiddle to Alexander Zinchenko all season. The 25-year-old Scot isn't going to be short of options should he decide to play his football elsewhere in the 2023-24 season. And fans on social media believe he will be heading off once the players return for pre-season in July. One fan tweeted, "Yep, it looks like the end. How sad. I always counted on Tierney." Another said, "That looks like a farewell to me." Another commented, "It's clear, he's leaving." And a fourth added, "Watching that, you'd think Kieran Tierney is going to go, sadly." And that report was by Ewan Payton. That concludes this week's edition of the Glasgow Times Sports Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Q&Review and to tell your friends about our service.